We will now convene our special council meeting for June the 25th. Again, I will note that all of our council is present with the exception of Mr. Summers, who is out of town and excused. Items 1A and 1B on this agenda are to conduct a public hearing on the proposed fiscal year 2023 through 2024 budget and proposed fiscal year 2023-24 secondary property tax levy, and a resolution approving the city's budget for the next fiscal year. I declared the public hearing on those items open. Ms. Mosley, I know we have some requests to speak. Do you have anything in addition to what you've previously given me?
No, I gave you all the ones that request to speak. I received one more that does not request to speak in opposition, but I'll hold on to it until.
So I have two stacks, and I'm going to go ahead and read the names of those who have said that they oppose what the motion, but they do not wish to speak. I assume they're giving me their cards because they want us to know that they are opposed. So included in this stack are Gary Rowley, Charmaine Wood, Patrick Wood, Jerry Dingledine, Carol Winstanley, Keith Lovell, Kimberly Crowther-Miller, Brian Eckley, and Deborah Kirkland. Those who wish to speak, I will invite to come forward, please. And we're looking forward to hearing from you for 3 minutes. First, we'll hear from David Winstanley. Welcome, David.
Thank you. Mayor Giles, honorable city council members, staff, and citizens. I'm here to speak on the budget. In particular, what caught my attention is in a city council meeting a few weeks ago, the Honorable Mr. Brady talked about a $1.8 billion surplus. And my question to you is, whose money is that? Legally, it belongs to the city of Mesa, but surely there's a fiduciary responsibility to the citizens. The average salary of Mesa citizens, according to Indeed, is $46,000. The average income for the households in Mesa, according to the Census Bureau, is $60,000. That means half the people in Mesa make less than $60,000. If there's a surplus in the budget, surely it should be given back to the citizens. In a similar vein, if I understand it correctly, there is money in the budget for construction improvement projects, and yet we were asked to approve a bond in the most recent election, and it was indeed approved, for fire and for 2 fire stations and some other improvements. If we have a surplus, why do we need to borrow money for 25 years and pay interest on that if there's money to pay it another way? Surely, like ASU downtown, which was turned down and yet money was found for it, we can do the same thing in the budget. So I ask you to seriously reconsider looking at the budget and maybe toning it down a little bit, give some back to the citizens. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you, Mr. Winstanley. You asked some great questions, and I think rather than wait till the end, let's address the questions as they come up so that we don't lose track of any of them. Mr. Brady, I don't think you said we had an $1.8 billion surplus, but
I don't. Our total budget this year is $2.6 billion. So I'm trying to think about what the context of that. I'm trying to remember what I.
It was in the discussion of the amount of money that you could spend without city council approval. What was raised from $25,000 to $100,000. Oh, well,
that was months ago, okay. And it wouldn't be $1.8 billion. So I don't know how those two relate. The city's budget.
No, I was talking about what I heard, and maybe I heard it wrong, was there was a very large surplus. That was the number I heard. Perhaps I misheard.
Yeah, Mr. Stanley, go ahead and take a seat, and we will address that question.
Yeah,
Mr. Brady, what is the amount of the fund balance at this point?
So right now, the city looks at it as a percentage, right? And so we have multiple funds. And so we have the utility funds, and we have the general funds. So the general funds is typically what most people associate with local government. That's mostly police, fire, libraries, parks. So those are the general governmental. The utilities are very different because they're based on fees, right? So water, wastewater, gas, electric. Gas, electric, many other cities don't even have those types of services. It may include other things like solid waste. They're separated, and we do not, we operate them separately because the utilities are based on fees, on user fees, to support those utilities, and it goes to pay off the capital and the operations for those utilities. The general fund is, again, most of the most significant revenue that supports the general fund comes from sales tax. And so in other sources of licenses and fees, but the largest portion is from sales tax. The city only has a property tax to support the debt that we issue. And to your point, we are very careful that the bonds, when we go and ask our voters to support additional capital, fire station, parks, libraries, museums, we only set the secondary property tax to pay off that principal and interest for that next year. And the good news is, because of all the new construction in Mesa and because values of properties, existing values have gone up, the city is going to be recommending a 6% reduction in the tax rate for everyone, on average for everyone in the city of Mesa. So I don't know if I'm answering the question, but in each one of those, utility fund and general fund, there are separate reserves that we look at. We work with our rating agencies that are important for us to rate our ability to pay back our debt. And in each case, we establish policies to establish our reserves between 10 and 15% on the general fund. For the last 3 years, we've ended up at 30%. And so that's a pretty high reserve. You'll see in the budget, we continue to try to find ways to use one-time expenditures, capital expenditures, to bring that reserve down, because we've been fortunate in Mesa because of a lot of the growth and activity. We've seen additional revenues coming in, but we have the need to support lots of new capital projects, and because projects have gone overrun. All those bonds we talk about that we've issued, the price we thought it was going to cost to build a fire station, sometimes it's now double that. The cost to purchase, just on today's agenda, $6 million worth of fire trucks. Those are much more expensive than we had originally thought. So we use these additional revenues that come into the city one time to pay for those expenditures. So our reserves, both in the general fund, are doing very well. They're exceptionally well. They're well above even our own policy that we have. On the utility fund, likewise. The utility fund, typically we set those reserves a little bit higher just because of the vulnerability of rates. There could be a drought, there could be spike in prices and commodity prices, so we're very careful and establish a much more conservative reserve in our utility fund. And we, again, continue to maintain and meet those standards of those reserves all the time. You may see that there are years where we plan on spending more than are coming in those current revenues, but we're doing that because our reserves are so significant that we use those to pay for one-time projects to bring that reserve down, because we want to make sure we're using the dollars the way they need to be used, and investing those in Mesa is how we try to do that. And most recently, most of those reserves have been to pay for cost overruns because of inflation, supply chain issues, construction delays has really put a lot of pressure on us to have to use those reserves to pay for those expenses.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Brady. I'm sure we'll have a lot to say at the end of this, but as we go through the questions, let's make sure we don't lose track of them. Next, we'll hear from Kerry Davis. Mr. Davis.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, City Council. My name is Kerry Davis. I live in Mesa, Arizona. Since 2011, the city has overspent general governmental revenues by $947 million and transferred from the utility fund over $1.2 billion to cover this overspending gap. According to the tentative proposed budget for 2024, the city's budgeted expenditures are $2.56 billion, with projected resources of only $1.542 billion. To cover this $1 billion overspending gap, the city budget uses $516 million of reserve balances and new bond proceeds of $525 million. At 5% interest over 25 years, these bonds will cost over $400 million in interest. Instead of borrowing $525 million to pay for capital improvements, if the city had not overspent $947 million since 2001, the city may have been able to internally finance the capital improvements and save over $400 million in interest expense. The repayment of these bonds, as previously mentioned by City Manager Brady, that is paid for back by the secondary property taxes. So this additional $400 million in interest will be additional burden on the residents. According to the 2022 annual comprehensive financial reports for Phoenix, Tucson, Tempe, Chandler, Gilbert, Scottsdale, Glendale, Goodyear, Surprise, and Peoria, none of these 10 cities overspent their general governmental revenues. I believe because the city relies so heavily on borrowing to pay for capital improvements and has not controlled general governmental spending, Mesa has the highest debt level of these 10 cities. It's my opinion when the city decided to not charge a primary property tax in 1946, it probably wanted to keep taxes low for its residents, not give the city carte blanche to raid the utility funds and grow government and overburden ratepayers. I estimate in 2022, if the city charged a primary property tax, it would have collected approximately $40 million. But the city transferred over $115 million from the utility fund. In essence, the city transferred over $75 million more than in lieu of primary property taxes. I believe the city should be able to operate within its means without charging a primary property tax and overcharging interest ratepayers. In view of the likelihood of a recession, I believe it would be prudent for the city to reduce spending and follow the example of our Arizona State Legislature. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Mr. Davis has said much the same before.
Yeah,
but
I'll just quickly say this. The city of Mesa does not overspend its budget. We get, every year, we have to go to present in front of very sophisticated financial institutions who do a rating of the city. And every year we get some of the highest ratings of any city in the country, probably as well as any city in the valley in this area. And so we feel very confident in what we do, and it's validated by others who look at other cities across the country. Just to assure you of the city's financial position today, we have very healthy reserves. We have about $1 billion in cash today on hand. So we're not overspending money. We're not going bankrupt. We're trying to find ways to invest the money that we have in very wise and prudent ways so that it's a long-term investment for the city. We don't just go and spend money just because we have it. And his reference to the transfer, we've talked about this every time he shows up. It's an established formula that City of Mesa put, its forefathers put a long time ago with specific intention to replace the property tax with their utility transfer. It's just how Mesa has done things since the 1940s, and we've continued to do it. We have very strict policies and ordinances how that can be done. It's built into our forecast with our utilities, and we do very well. We have some of the best utilities probably in the country, and that's a reason why companies like Apple, Facebook, and Google come to Mesa and nowhere else in this state or the western part of the United States. It's because of our infrastructure and because how cheap it is.
I'll just add to that when our city fathers back in 1945 repealed the general property tax, at the same time they purchased the utilities. So it wasn't just we're trying to reduce taxes. It was we're going to use a different scheme to pay for city services, and rather than have utility companies profit from our residents, we're going to use the revenue that comes from utilities in place of a primary property tax. So you can't do one and not the other. And Mesa, and that makes Mesa very unique. That's why perhaps when you look at our balance sheets and you wonder why we have a lot of bond debt, it's because we are very much in the utility business, far more than any of the cities that you identified in your comments. So there's two sides to that story. It very much was the model that we adopted in 1945 and we continue to use today, that we're going to generate revenue off of our utility accounts. Now, we will be, we're not addressing utility rates tonight. That will be this fall. And I suspect that many of you will be back and we'll be discussing the affordability of Mesa's utilities at that time. Mesa's utilities are affordable. We are very competitive with the for-profit institutions and the other cities in town. Tonight's not the night we'll talk about that, but please come back in the fall and we'll have a great discussion about the appropriateness of our utility rates. Next is Dennis Lyles.
Mr. Mayor, council members, good evening. My name is Dennis Lyles. And my very first council meeting I was at, there was a purchase approved for a hotel of approximately $2.8 million over the assessed value. And when I look at the budget of paying $500 million, of having more than $500 million more than your revenues, I think there's a math problem here. So my message here tonight is very simple. Mesa has a distinction of being one of the only cities that spends more than they take in revenue. I know about the reserve funds and all that sort of thing, but my message here is we have to live within our budget and pay for these increasing water bills. I know we'll be talking about that in the fall, but again, we have to live in our budget, and to spend more than you take in is fiscally irresponsible. So we have to live within our budget, and I think you need to do the same. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll say it's not fiscally irresponsible, it's impossible. We are not the federal government. We can't print money. The city of Mesa cannot spend more than it brings in.
Yeah, and I'll just quickly say that $500 million that keeps getting repeated is a misassociation of how finances work in cities. What counts is a lot of that is just like tonight. Tonight, the council purchased three fire trucks for $6 million. We have the money today. We have to. We can't even put it on the agenda unless we have the money. Our fiscal year ends at the end of June. Those fire trucks aren't going to show up for 3 years. So what we do is we have to purchase them now. We have the revenues to purchase them. But what's going to happen is they're not going to show up. We're not going to actually be able to spend the money for years in advance. What happens is those revenues that are identified today fall to the bottom, to the reserves. And they continue and stay into the reserves until those fire trucks show up. So yes, if you show current revenues and current expenses, you'll see a big gap. But what you're not doing is you're not associating, there's a huge amount of reserves that are there that are associated with those expenditures, and they will eventually be available when those expenditures come to fruition.
I think that's a good point. Sometimes when you look at the city of Mesa budget, the revenues at the end of the year, they go into the fund balances, and the expenses continue on the accounting sheets. And so it looks like, oh, wait a minute, you've got all these built up expenses, some of them carried over from multiple years, but where are the revenues? They're not on the balance sheet anymore. Well, that's because they moved into the fund balance. So it is sometimes might look misleading. Sharman Fullman. I apologize if I've mispronounced your last name, Charlotte. I'm sorry, Sharman.
That's okay, I'm squeezably soft.
We'll never forget your name.
I hope you don't. Mayor Giles, Honorable City Council members, Honorable Mr. Brady, City Manager, my name is Sharman Pullman. I'm a third generation of Arizona, which Arizona means a lot to me. And I live in the Southeast Mesa in Scott Summers District 6. I came here tonight to represent people like me and all of some of these who live on a fixed income. I have not participated, and my husband and I have not participated in the inflation which has occurred as the highest in the U.S., so we have been pinched. I was retired for 2 years, had to go off retirement because of inflation. So when I hear that City of Mesa, their budget is continually going up over the years, it breaks my heart, because I know that Mesa, the people here love Mesa. That's why they live here. And some of us do not have fancy homes, good paying jobs, so we have to live on a limited budget. I'm here to ask you to consider not increasing the budget above last year's value and return some of it to us. Perhaps you can reduce the transfer of the $100 million from the utility fund to the general operating fund and reduce our water bills by $20 to $25 a month. we would still be paying more than the cities and towns around us, but at least we would know that you are listening to us. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to your careful consideration of our requests. Thank you.
Thank you, Charmin. Next,
Just quickly, just to say something real quick on that. A big portion of that transfer is specific to public safety. So when you look at our budget and what's increasing, we are adding more police officers and firefighters, fire stations and fire trucks than we ever have been. So when you think about that transfer, remember a big portion of that is actually paying for police and fire services in Mesa.
thank you. And I've got more comments on that as well, but maybe I'll add that at the end here. Next, we'll hear from Will Stassi.
Good evening. My name is Will Stacey. These are rhetorical questions and statements. Please do not respond. If you feel a strong, passionate desire to respond, there are newspapers to voice your response to a wider audience. Learn how to reduce the budget. Just because you have the funds doesn't mean you have to spend all the funds. Try to implement some different approaches. There is no incentive to reduce the budget. It is not your money. Tell all departments to reduce their budget 2%. They will find ways to do it because they are intelligent. Establish a standard temperature for all city-owned buildings, winter and summer. Then reduce it 1 degree in winter and up 1 degree in summer. Install day, nighttime temperature settings, which will be different based on occupied and non-occupied buildings. Manage public safety resources better. If you patrol private property like strip malls, invoice them for service. If you stop a homeless person sitting on the sidewalk, assign only one vehicle to address the issue, not 2 or 3. Spend no more than 15 minutes explaining loitering, trespassing, unless making an arrest. In the heat, provide a cold bottle of water from the ice chest in the patrol car. Stop purchasing police vehicles with a towing package. The city has no trailers and no officers trained in towing a trailer. The best part, the city has no ball hitches and no wiring connections for a trailer anyway. When you buy a Motel 8 for $7.4 million for off-the-street ballroom, explain why a purchase has no alternative option, B or C. How much was the cost of Hopper Heights facility and 152 North 56th Street, Mesa, is option B? Was option C a West Mesa or North Mesa location? Will the Motel 8 have the same armed police guard 24/7 in vehicles as the Windmere Hotel? Can the same results not be achieved with a third-party security company at a lower cost? What is the ROI of license plate reader cameras, or whatever you call them, at various intersections? What % reduction in crime statistics result from these cameras? How many more cameras are in the new budget? I understand you'll explain these are from federal grants, but are they 100% of grants? And what are our other options to spend the same money? Do you believe the federal grants will stop at some time? And one last thing, if the grocery stores have developed this system called online shopping, and you can order your groceries and have them delivered to your door, why do we need to send a hook and ladder truck, 6 firemen, and 3 MTs to go grocery shopping 3 times a week? Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you. I'm sorry, please don't clap. Thank you. Any additional requests to speak from the public?
No further requests, Mayor.
All right, thank you. Do any council members wish to address these items? Mr. Freeman.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, I appreciate everybody coming here and speaking about the budget. Several of us sat on the Audit and Finance Committee. I've been a chairman for the past 3 years. Councilperson Jen Duff is now our chair. We review our finances every few months in the city, and we do an annual comprehensive report for our audit. And some has, said we spend more than we take in. That's not the case. We spend within our budget. I'm a small businessman. I know exactly what it takes to spend and work a budget, and we anticipate, our 3 funding sources, which are sales tax revenue, our utility revenue, and our state shared revenue. Those are 3 funding sources, and as the mayor said, I've grown up here that our predecessors have created not a primary property tax. And I hope you appreciate that, as well as we don't have a food tax as well. So we're leaving tens of millions of dollars of revenue that we choose not to collect as a city where other cities do. You know, just as you do and as I do and the city, we plan our budget and we set it out for 5 years. All our actuals have been certified, and we sign off on that comprehensive report. You know, you talk about the increased employees. Mr. Brady brought up, I'm a retired Mesa fire captain. I know how important it is to have our public safety personnel respond timely. Whether it's 2, 4, or 6 people responding to your home, there's a reason for that. And if there's a structure fire, a multi-vehicle accident, or other issues, a cardiac arrest, stroke, or anything, we have our responsive personnel showing up. And I hope there's 6 people. I hope there's 8 people there, saving my life, saving your life. I think that's extremely important. Part of our budgets is increase of our public safety personnel. And that's what we have to do to provide the services. All of us pay in our taxes to have the proper public safety personnel responding to our home. You know, I can go more and more into that, but we do not have high debt in our city. We're very responsible. Some of you will disagree with that, but I know from a personal experience that sitting on our Audit and Finance Committee that we analyze our budget in depth. We go through the auditors. We take apart all the different silos and we put it all together. And yeah, right now we're experiencing a $1,052 million surplus in funds, but that will be chipped away as we do our CIP projects in the future. So as we move forward, I appreciate the comments and I stand by what we've done. We have an actual budget and it's going to be higher. There's no doubt about it. But at the end of the day, this is the budget we have to be able to be responsive for all our utilities, our public safety and everything that we do, keep our roads, our parks, everything in top working condition and not run down. So with that, I'll end. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman. Ms. Pillsbury.
Yeah, I'll just make a few comments. First of all, I want to thank everyone for being here. I wish we had this much participation at every council meeting. You're invited every single meeting, and even if you're coming to complain about things or things you disagree with, that's part of the process. And so I want to just thank you for being here and being part of the process. And I want to tell sweet Charmin, we love Mesa too. We wouldn't be sitting up here if we didn't love Mesa. This is where my husband and I decided to raise our family, and I hope all 6 of my kids decide to raise their kids here. We love Mesa, and so that's why we spend a lot of our time and effort to help the city grow and to improve. And we might not agree on everything, but we're all trying to do our best up here. I want to express my confidence in our financial department of our city, our Office of Management and Budget. Wow, I can't say that. Office of Management and Budget, our city treasurer, our city chief financial officer, as well as all of their departments. As Councilmember Freeman said, we have outside auditors, we have internal auditors, we have so many checks and balances, so much transparency, nothing's hidden, it's all out there. So many different people are looking at this. There's probably, you know, as the last speaker said, there's probably ways we could cut, but the thing is every single department is constantly looking at ways we can save money and what makes sense. And I appreciate that. As I've been on council for the last 2.5 years, I've really been able to see how careful everyone is with the money. That's your money. It's the money that we take that responsibility very seriously. The staff does, and so I just want to express my confidence in what they're doing and why I'm in support of the budget.
Thank you, Ms. Pillsbury. Ms. Duff.
I'll just go ahead and chime in as chair of the Audit and Finance Committee, Council Committee. We do I've been on that committee since I started on council, and so I'm in my 5th year of doing this. And we do review the budget in depth. One of the things I realized when I started on council, people said, well, you know, what do you think about being on council and how does that change your view? I was overwhelmed on the transparency, the check, double check, triple check, internal audits, external audits, this audit, that review is very, very thorough. And we do go over the budget in depth. It takes several months and every category and every expenditure. I do want to mention that a few years ago, we did commit to, I think the figure is like 25% of our utility revenues to public safety. Huh? 30%, 25% to public safety. Okay. 30% of our utility revenues goes to the city operations. 25% of that is to public safety. We are spending, our public safety budget is $352 million this year. Now, there was a comment that that should be covered by primary property tax of $44 million. You can see there's just no way to even get close to the operations of just our public safety, let alone all the other services that we cover. Our secondary property tax for the average homeowner in Mesa is $145 a year. That is a great price for the investment of the capital improvements that we make to run our city. $145 a year for the capital improvements that we have to make of our growing city. One of the Maricopa is the fastest growing county in America, and Mesa has exponential growth. And yes, we do require more fire stations, more libraries, more infrastructure costs in order to run our city. Last year, Wallet Hub rated Mesa as the best managed city, second in the state and 20th in the nation. We are considered to be very conservatively run and very efficient, and our bond rating shows our financial strength. There are quite a bit of carryovers in our budget that you can follow, of money that is budgeted but hasn't been expended yet. We have $313 million in our regular carryover and $185 million in our capital expenditure carryover. So you know, that's almost $500 million is in carryover of things that have already committed and is going over into the next year. So everything is accounted for. I don't think we are in any excess at all. We all have a long list of ways that we could do more for our community. We would like to, but we realize we have to run a budget that we can be accountable for year after year for the employees and the services. We can't go up and down. We have to be as level as possible in everything we do to be accountable and responsible. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Duff. Any other comments? I appreciate, let me just underline some things that have already been said. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for engaging on this topic and any others that you might find motivate you to come out. This is an issue. We have been in budget hearings for the last several months. This is something that takes up a big amount of our city council time, and that's because we care about this. The reason that you live in Mesa, Arizona, one of the reasons you live in Mesa, Arizona is because Mesa is affordable. That's been our legacy for my whole life. And we're not about to lose that reputation. And so I again would invite you to come when we discuss utility rates in the fall. I can tell you for the last several years that I've been on council, we hate raising utility rates. And so we have either held them static or we have made only very nominal rate increases to respond to inflation for the last few years. And so we'll have that debate again in the fall, but please come and let's have that discussion then. Another reason that you live in Mesa, Arizona, and that I live here is because we are known as one of the safest communities in the United States. And that doesn't come easy. There are a lot of communities in this country that are having very energized debates about defunding public safety. We're doing the opposite in Mesa, and that's because that's what people want. We are hiring more police officers and firefighters, and we're building more fire stations so that we can lower response times, and that's because that's what the voters of Mesa, Arizona have told us they want to do. And that's consistent with the values of our community. We prioritize safety here, and that comes at a price. Another thing I love about our community is we are a compassionate community, and we are not a community. If you travel to the West Coast, there is ubiquitous homelessness in all of the public areas. In just about any city you're going to find in California and Oregon and Washington, and the same is true in a lot of other parts of this country. You don't find that in Mesa, Arizona. So for us to be able to maintain that quality of life in our community, we have to invest in homeless services. And we were fortunate to have a federal grant that allowed us to purchase a hotel on Far East Mesa. Without that facility, without the ability to have emergency beds to take homeless people to, we can't enforce our urban camping laws, and we will become one of those cities that I described earlier. So all of the things that were talked about and that are incorporated into this budget, they reflect the values that explain why you live here and why I live here. So again, I assure you this was done very deliberately with a lot of work. That's not to say we don't need to be very responsive to the questions that you've raised. They were good questions, and they were asked in good faith, and I appreciate that. Okay, having said that, we have a motion for Mr. Freeman to approve, and seconded by Mr. Heredia. This is for item 1B. It's a resolution approving the budget for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2024. Please vote. That passes unanimously with Mr. Summers being absent. That is all of the items that we have on this special council meeting agenda. Is there a motion to adjourn? Thank you, Ms. Pillsbury, and seconded by Mr. Freeman. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Thank you. We are adjourned.